We have a special guest here today. If you are a massive fan of Battlestar Galactica or Buck Rogers in the 25th century, also 3D printing, and you're a fan of also classic toys, you probably already know about this already, but it's someone I've been wanting to talk to for quite a while. It's kind of fandom has gone crazy for this project, how people are so excited about this. And, even when I first heard about this, I thought this was absolutely astounding, especially the level. Before we kind of go into any of that, I'd like to welcome Robert to the TGF stream and also Cause and Effect Gamers.
Hi, good to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So, first of all, okay, classic Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers in the 25th century. So, was this something that you watched as a child?
It was. I was around 10 years old at the time when Battlestar came out, and I was a huge fan. I was a fan of Star Wars, and then when Battlestar came out, I was so enamored that the figures were such a smaller subset compared to Star Wars, and I felt that I could actually obtain all of them. Instead of having 100 figures, there was maybe 8. So it was obtainable for me. I loved that. However, I was traumatized because, as everyone knows, the whole choking incident happened with the Viper, and my mother actually took my Viper away from me to prevent any injuries. So I was extremely sad that I lost my Viper.
Wow, yeah, it's even as a child, you're talking, many years before pre-internet. Even as a 7-year-old kid, I knew that story. I'd heard about it. I don't know whether I'd seen it on a news item or other kids talking about it, saying, "Oh yeah, some kids choked on it, and it's going to affect all these other toys." And I never end up getting one of those, Mattel ships, which I was like, oh, I want one of those. But yeah, they kind of, in where I grew up, which was fairly rural, they disappeared pretty quickly. So it was something that I was pretty amazed with. So Battlestar Galactica.
They had a big. I'm sorry, they had a big recall.
Yeah. Oh wow.
So it was on the news, and I believe you had to turn them into the toy stores. So I lost mine. Very sad.
Oh wow, I wouldn't have been able to cope with something like that.
As you can tell, I still haven't quite recovered from it.
Yeah, well, it is. I think with anyone, it's like, if it's something that's beloved to you, it never leaves you. It's especially at that age, it's so impressionable. These things are a part of you. Yeah. Now, Buck Rogers in the 25th century came a little bit later, so not far afterwards.
Yep, and I fell in love with that show immediately. I thought Gil Gerard was an awesome character. He had a great presence on the show, and the Starfighter is just iconic. What a great design for a spaceship.
Oh yeah, I can. We were saying before the interview that these movies had cinematic and drive-in releases here in Australia. So our first impression of these things was on the big screen. But yeah, Gil Gerard, for me, I was like, wow, look at this guy, and and it was like, oh, he's kind of like does martial arts in a way. So he kicks and stuff, and we were really impressed by that, because I think around the time we were still getting Monkey Magic, which is a Japanese show. We would get that in the afternoon, so that was really impressionable. And then we were like, oh well, yeah, we've got this guy, and he does these sort of things, and the whole thing about the apocalyptic, Chicago and everything else. We were like, this is really good. And I think also is I know that there was a lot more people I knew around the time, girls and other family members, that actually watched Buck Rogers, because it seemed to have a bit more. It was a bit more lighthearted than Battlestar Galactica was. So
definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. And so did you get the figures for Buck Rogers back then too?
I did. I was very fortunate. I distinctly remember my mother and myself making a trip to the Bradley's department store the day they came out, and I was able to get one of each. So I was thrilled.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I had a cousin who lived in another town, and their town always seemed to get, all the ships, action figures, Buck Rogers, Battlestar Galactica, all those. Well, the town I went to was just purely Star Wars. So I was like, it was going to another world. The only thing I ever got that was Buck Rogers as a kid was the pop-up book, and I still have it, and I absolutely love that book. So yeah, but okay, we've talked. Yep.
I do remember being a little bit disappointed when I got the figures because the accessories were glued to the belt.
Yes.
So I found that to be a little disappointing, but I was happy that I was able to acquire them.
Yeah. Fantastic. So yeah. So okay. So we've talked about the fan, but what we're really here is to talk about your 3D printing. So can you tell us a little bit especially about the first item you've done that kind of really set kind of everything going?
So the first thing that I started to release to people for sale is the Viper. It's seen great success. I'm just blown away at how many people have fell in love with it and how it's captured their imaginations and the childhood memories that they had. It's just been a fantastic response, and like I said, I'm blown away.
Yeah, the for those that we'll put some images in with this later, but that Colonial Viper that you've done, it's exactly like the original small one that was released that didn't have action figures. So what process did you go through to make it? When you look at it, it looks like you've just expanded it. How did you get those exact details?
So what I did is the first step was to look at the original toy and see what changes I could make to it that might be improvements, or what changes I would need to make to be able to print it. The original toys were injection molded, and that process is drastically different than 3D printing. So some areas would need to be modified and optimized for printing. Some of these include on my Viper, some of the differences are on the original toy, the rear fins, they actuate up and down, where personally, I didn't really like that feature when I was a kid, so I eliminated it, and it enabled me to make my fins more durable and more robust. So they're stationary, but they're much more sturdy. Another area is the front wheel on the original Viper. There's actually a little tiny wheel, and I didn't really think that added much value to the toy. So it made it much easier to print, making it one solid piece. So it still supports the vehicle in the same way, but it's, like I said, a lot easier to manufacture the way that I did it.
Yeah, it's incredible. The images I've seen, and also Michael French from Retro Blasting, when he purchased his, and he was beside himself with excitement, and and when he showed that, I was like, wow, this is incredible, and fits the 3 3/4 action figures. How long have you been thinking about doing this?
Actually, the Viper was a spur of the moment thing. When I had first started 3D printing, I think like everybody else, I had access to a 3D printer at work. So I went on Thingiverse and just found a couple of files that seemed interesting, like Baby Yoda, which I think everybody has printed. And I started experimenting with that. And then the first thing that I created on my own was the Battlestar Galactica Landram. Because it's so rare, hardly anybody has access to them. So I went ahead and created a 1-to-1 model of it And like the Viper, what my process is I use my handy dandy verniers and measure each detail on the toy and recreate a 3D model of it. But like I was leading up to is I started with the land ram and kind of got my feet wet and figured out what changes needed to be made. And that was fairly successful. I was able to make maybe a dozen of them, and they came out pretty nice. I was happy with that.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I've seen, Mike with one of the Land Rams, and, how impressed he was. And, and because of the production values of retro blasting of the show, you could really see the detail. And it's really good because it was only probably around 6 months ago, I'd actually seen a Battlestar Galactica Land Ram for the first time at a toy store here in Melbourne. That's for sale, but it's a bit out of my price range. But I was like, okay, look at that. So, and then when I saw yours, I was like, wow, that just, because that's still fresh in my mind. I saw this one and I was like, that's just absolutely astounding. So yeah, it's
well, actually the one that Michael had is a scaled up version. The first one I did was scaled same size as the original. Okay. So it's pretty small, only like this big. Scaling it up was a lot of work. That was one of the most challenging vehicles that I've made.
Yeah,
it was very, very difficult to, because of the boxy shape of it, it's difficult when you get to that size because you end up with a lot of warping and other printing issues that I had to figure out how to overcome.
Yeah. So and that's the one thing I just love about this whole story is just how excited everyone has been by this. It's like every now and again someone does something and you go, wow, that it really catches people's imagination. Where's the furthest away from where you live, like other countries that you've been contacted about your creations?
Australia.
Oh, okay. So
I've actually shipped 3 Vipers off to Australia.
Oh wow, fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, any particular city? Was it Sydney, Melbourne, Perth?
Let's see. Sorry for the delay. Okay. I don't have the cities listed.
That's
I just
all right.
have the country.
It's not overly important, but yeah, it'd be interesting to actually see because I kept thinking that if you sent 3 here, they're eventually going to pop up somewhere here where someone's going to go, I've got one. So it'd be interesting to see. And
I've also shipped a couple off to Singapore, so that's pretty far away also.
Yeah. So yeah, it must be really, thrilling to have, so many people around the world, be captured in, something you've done for the love of your own personal love. And I think that's the big thing about it is that you put yourself into it.
Yeah. I guess the word I would use is humbling.
Yeah.
My favorite days of the week are usually Wednesday and Thursday because I do my shipping on Saturday mornings to get everything off to the post office. So usually around Wednesday or Thursday is when they start to arrive at people's homes and my messages start to pile in with the accolades and the thanks. And it's just extremely humbling that people appreciate the work that I put into them.
Yeah, it's really good because it's I think with certain things I've always seen where like as a kid with the Hoth Han Solo, I lived in I wouldn't even call it a town. It was that rural. And the first thing I remember looking at and going, oh, okay, looks like I can stick his blaster in that little hook on his hip. And I used to always think, oh, maybe I'm the only one who's done that, And then years later, the internet appears, and then you've got people all over the world, the kids, our age, who all did the same thing, and it doesn't matter if they're in the United States or Australia or they're in Germany or even South America. They all did the same thing. And so it's interesting that that logic or that sort of mindset, but also that universal love for the toys and those things from that period.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't know how closely you've been able to examine the Starfighter that I did, but I'm very, very happy with the end product of that. I was able to correct, or at least in my mind, correct some of the initial or original design flaws, such as the
Hmm.
canopy, which was extremely fragile. I
Hmm.
was always afraid to open and close it because it would either pop off or break.
Hmm.
So I updated the canopy hinge design to a much more robust design, and as well as the rear stabilizer fins. I
Hmm.
was able to make those much stronger and add some strength to them. So
Hmm.
I'm pretty happy with the improvements I was able to make to
Yeah.
that ship.
And I think that's another acknowledgement of I think your connection with everyone else is that everyone else would have had those same thoughts growing up, going, "Oh, I wish this would happen," or or it broke that way. You've got those same thoughts, but the thing is, you've acted on it, and then everyone else has come running for it, going, "Oh, I really really want this." Like I've never actually seen. The actual Buck Rogers Starfighter, even the original one, everyone else I knew, they had the telescopic, black hole style one, but yeah, everyone had the draconian ship.
Yes.
So, but yeah, still, it was like it's amazing looking design, and then yeah, all the things reading about that vehicle over the years, other people saying those things, and then hearing that you've improved those sort of things, it really spoke to me, and of course it spoke to a lot of other people. So how long have
Mm-hmm.
you been actually 3D printing?
Well, I'm embarrassed to say that I'm pretty new to 3D printing.
Yeah.
I first started printing last summer,
Wow.
so just about a year now.
Yeah. Well, you
Yeah,
yeah, it's anyone would say you've been doing it for like 10 years. Yeah. So
well, I'm pretty fortunate. The
mhm,
company that I work for has a makerspace area,
mhm,
and we have access to 3 different 3D printers. So I had some spare time.
yeah.
I started playing around with them last summer, and like I mentioned, took some files off of Thingiverse, played with those, figured out that it was a really interesting hobby. So
Hmm.
I purchased my first machine around October, I believe, and everything blew up from there. I went from 1 machine to 2 machines to 4 machines, and now I'm up to 10.
Wow. Well, you'd have to have that many because you've got so many people asking for vehicles and ships and stuff that you would need
Yeah.
you'd need an assembly line to get it done. So you're kind of like a 21st century Ford.
Sort of. I've got a
Yeah,
couple of friends that help me out. They
yeah.
they have printers, and they print up parts and bring them over to me, and I do the assembly. Some of the parts take a very long time to print. For example, the Starfighter body, that part is a 2-day, 10-hour print.
Wow.
So being someone that prints yourself, you can imagine that there's quite a few of them that don't quite make it, either due
Yes.
to you get a power outage or a filament issue or some sort of issue. So it's 2 days and 10 hours is a really tough print to
Mhm.
have work out well.
Hmm. How do you deal with temperature control as well?
Well, I do all of my work in my office, in my
Mhm,
home.
mhm,
So I have it regulated with a air conditioner and a heater. So it
mhm.
maintains approximately a 68, 70-degree temperature
Mm.
and very low humidity.
Yeah, because I know that can be a big factor where you get because like I see some people that they've got videos online and they've got a setup and they've got it in their garage and and I'm looking at these metal doors and thinking I'm thinking, well, yeah, you're still going to get cold coming through there, and they're not sealed
Right.
garage; they're open, and it's like, well, in summer, depending where you are, you could be getting hotter. If you're closer to the equator, you're going to get a lot more humidity, and yeah, you're going to have.
Exactly. Yeah. But
Yeah.
since you mentioned it,
Hmm.
something that I didn't take into account when I was creating my home office and my print area is I located everything in the room on my first floor in my home where the thermostat is. And having so many machines, they generate a lot of heat.
Hmm.
So it sort of screws up the heat in the rest of the house because my thermostat always thinks it's 74 degrees
Yeah.
and I have to keep the air conditioner running, but the rest of the house gets really cold in the wintertime.
Okay. Yeah. And how about ventilation? Is that the system you have in the house help get any kind of plasticky smells or anything like that?
The machines that I have run really clean. I don't
Yeah.
notice any smells at all, but I do have the air conditioner running, so it's very well ventilated.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a time when I experimented with resin printers,
Mm-hmm.
and those had a pretty bad odor. So those didn't last long. They didn't really meet my process.
So the one thing I'll ask a little bit about your background is like we went through high school or any other education or just personally was mathematics a strong thing with you, like an engineering background or that sort of thing, or is it, or are you just more
Yeah,
creative?
actually, no. I actually for my profession, I'm a plastics engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a few degrees. I have an engineering degree, a business degree, and a master's degree in business.
Mm-hmm.
I have been in the plastics industry for close to 20 years now, either as a injection mold designer or a plastics engineer.
Yeah. So that, like, to me, like, hearing that you've been in plastics for so long, was it always in the back of your mind, like, I'm going to be making toys one day?
Well, thought has crossed my mind.
Yeah.
I am about an hour and a half away from the Hasbro main office, so
Okay.
that wouldn't be too far of a stretch, but
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah. So, have you ever thought about, getting into, other like actual toy design, you know,
Um, Actually, I haven't.
hmm,
I'm very happy with my current job, my
hmm,
full-time job. So I find a lot of enjoyment in that.
hmm,
And I wouldn't want to take something that I view as a hobby and turn it into my everyday work because then it's not fun, it's work.
yeah, yeah. And that's a good thing. I think many people kind of think, oh, if I could do this all the time, and then they see people leave. Like I see this a lot with games development, where there's many people I've known over the years, and they've been in the industry like 6-7 years, and they've gone, oh, they're burnt out from the long hours, and they leave.
Exactly.
And you get younger people and other going, oh, but you're doing games, and like it became a job, and I'm
Yep.
doing extreme hours, and it just took the love out of it, took the fun out of it, and it was work.
Exactly.
Hmm. So,
Yeah, I learned at a very young age. I had a friend and we used to do a lot of golfing together and we loved the game and he loved it to the point where he took that as his profession. He became a golf professional.
hmm,
And as soon as he did that, it changed for him because instead of being able to go out and play golf every day, he had to work in the pro shop.
hmm,
And it just was an entirely different perspective on where he went with his life. He had something that he loved, and
hmm,
I envied him because he was able to turn that into a profession, but
hmm.
he lost that part of what he really loved.
Yeah.
So for me, I like my job. I don't really have any ambitions to be a toy designer full time.
Hmm. Well, that's
I
good because
like it as a hobby.
yeah, I think also if it's still a hobby, you can still maintain that passion, and then when you're off doing work and things, and lunch or downtimes and things, you're thinking about, oh well, I could do this, and
Hmm.
it becomes a passion project. as opposed to I've got to do this. So
Exactly.
yeah, and yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. That's why I think I've changed roles many times over the years. So with the 3D printing, what's next? What are we going to see? Are we going to see? Is it still under wraps, or are we going to see something new, or are you going to just stick with these three because everyone's still kind of wanting a piece of it?
Well, I'm kind of thinking in the back of my mind about a couple of different things I'd like to create. In the near future, I'm going to be releasing a Battlestar Galactica starfighter.
All right.
Which I don't know if you're familiar, but the Buck Rogers starfighter was originally one of the designs for the Viper.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm going to do my take on what I think the starfighter might have looked like if it was on Battlestar Galactica.
So you can do like a Ralph McQuarrie special edition.
Yeah.
That's
I have
good.
it. Yeah. I have it all done. I've got the first one almost completely printed, and I am picking up the decals from my industrial designer this weekend, who happens to be my daughter.
Oh, wow.
She does all my decal work.
Oh, fantastic. So yeah, and now that's great. Like I was funny because that popped up on it might have been the BSG group, and someone was talking about it only like a week ago. But what's some of the different requests or comments people saying, why don't you do this? Is there any out there that you're kind of like, oh yeah, or nah, that's good, but it's something I maybe not.
Well, that's a really good question. I must receive at least 20 or so requests a week, and some of them are really, really good. And I give some good thought, but there are others that just don't fit my process. For me to undertake something, it has to meet a couple of criteria. One, it has to be desirable by a large group of people. It can't be from an obscure television show that had one season that almost nobody knows about, because if I put a couple of weeks into designing it, it's not going to be worth the effort to sell 2 of them. It really has to have a wide audience. It also needs to be able to be created with 3D printers. And by what I mean by that is the process that I use. I don't use any paint. I don't use any masking. I don't do any of that. It's as printed. I think that's important because when you buy a toy, they're not generally painted, especially vehicles. It's as molded. And I'm limited to what filament colors are available. So it's no surprise that most of the vehicles I've done so far are grays and whites. Those are fairly easy to come by. That's another criteria. Let's see, the last one would be, it needs to be able to be designed so that it's robust and not going to be fragile. I don't want to create something that someone's going to receive and break after a week. That's just disappointing. So I want it to have some longevity to it. If it can meet all of those criteria, then I would consider creating it. Some of the suggestions that I've received that sound interesting, but I can't bring myself to undertake it, is the Galactica. I must get 2 or 3 people a week that say, oh, you've got to make the Galactica, make it the size of the USS flag. And that would be awesome. But I'd probably have to charge upwards of $500 for it, and I'd only be able to sell 2 or 3 of them.
That's right.
You have very limited audience.
Yeah, I think with some things it's maybe the dream is better, or it's like it's one day you go, look, I'm making this, it's for me, and I'm just showing you that I've done it, and I'm not making any others. So if you want to have a go at it, by all means. And I think that's the other thing that I think people are also drawn to, because what you're doing, especially what you were saying about, you know, it, you know, if you look at even, you know, the GI Joe line, you know, they weren't painted, you know, they're plastic molds, and you go into toy stores today, a lot of them, and they're still plastic molds. That yeah, they look like, you know, how they see them, and I think that's with other things. But I think also is like if you start to kind of diversify into something like the Battlestar, it's like, well, you know, something that really wasn't actually kind of made, you know, or even concept. I think that kind of it loses a bit of its, you know, like I can see, you know, the Buck Rogers Starfighter, your Land Ram, your Vipers, you know, all those sort of vehicles going, and people going, oh, I want those because I always wanted something like, you know, like that. There's that love, but it's not like, you know, picking, you know, something from, you know, oh, I'm going to make some car that was in the Misfits of Science or something, and everyone's like, the what show? You know? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I had Courtney Cox in it, and you're like, yeah, but what happened? I don't even really remember myself. But it's like, yeah, it's like, you know, and I've seen people comment going, look, you know, how about the last Starfighter? And it's like, well, you know, that's an enormous ship based on it. But how would it look? And even with prototypes, I don't know if they ever did a prototype for. I know they did the prototypes for the figures, but I don't know if they did vehicles. You know, and how would it?
Yeah, that would take a lot of imagination and guesswork, just building off of images.
Yeah, and it's also expectation. It's like, you know, it's your Vipers and everything else is like there is already an expectation, or there's a look and how it's going to feel. But if you go into something else that people go, oh yeah, we'd really love that. If you changed it, made it smaller or moved something, then people go, oh yeah, it's great, but it's not, you know, yeah.
Exactly.
And that's where
something that I kind of struggle with now. I have, or I see a lot of comments where people suggest, oh, well, maybe you should use resin printing to clean up some of the print lines, or what can you do to make it more screen accurate? And I guess I've figured out that there's really two different mentalities when it comes to these. You've got the one group of people that are model makers and really looking to get screen accurate, weathered looking ships that you could use as a prop in the movie. And then you've got another group of people who are looking to relive their childhood, and they want it based on the toy that they remember having. Yeah. And that's what I'm really aiming at.
Yeah.
I am not a painter. I would never classify myself as that. And I could never create something that looks like it's ready to be put into a movie. My stuff, it looks like a toy. It looks like it should be played with. There are print lines. There are visible flaws because they are handmade. Yeah. And that's what I make.
But that's the charm of it all. That's the charm. And I think, yeah, it like they look like the toys. And even when Michael said, oh, yeah, yes, for some people they're going to see the lines, and I remember you could see you could see some of the lines on the image, but it was like, so what? You know, it's like
exactly.
If you look at you know any of the original Star Wars lines, the X-wings, you know, there's sometimes the two shells don't match up, and they're slightly off, and they pop, and there's glue stains, and there's all sorts of things.
Or there's screws, and just things that are required to manufacture it, and you get past it because it's a toy.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, it's that's just how it's made and how it is. And but yeah, when I saw yours, I was like, oh, genius. And you know, and also it's like, well, yes, Starbuck can go in there now, so fantastic. So and yeah, but like, yeah, it's like, it's true. It's like, and it's good that you've kind of even thought about going, well, yeah, you're sticking with that, you know, toy idea, as opposed to, you know, it's really easy to get into like, oh, well, okay, I'm going to try this, I'm going to make this, but you're kind of making it for, these people who are like, yeah, really, they should go and, you know, they should really be going. If they're a model maker, they should be going and buying
Right.
the models, or seeking out, okay, what parts were used in the 70s from tanks and battleships, and you go make that, because that's going to make them happy. And I've seen comments where you see these, incredible Battlestar Galactica, 1-to-1 scale models, and they look incredible. They're, handmade. They're all done.
Yes.
And look at the comments.
They're
and someone's
beautiful.
going, I don't like the color in this, and your funnel is, half a millimeter off, whatever. And it's like, this person has just spent 4 years, building this.
Yes.
It looks absolutely amazing. Leave him alone. No one else is going to see. No one else is going to know. So big deal. But I think it's great. Like, I've seen people talk about Last Starfighter, V and all those sorts of things. But but I think it just comes down to, as well as, you do really want to do that yourself.
Right.
But also, if you started creating something else, with the demand at the moment, you don't want to slow down your demand, because people will be like, but I want this. But,
right now I just couldn't take on any new work. I have the 4 vehicles that I'm currently offering, and I actually had to eliminate my Pegasus Viper. It didn't have enough interest to dedicate a machine to it anymore. So I made that a limited edition, and I'm not offering that anymore. But the other 4, I'm still getting a lot of interest in, and until they sort of peter off, I'm going to have to hold off on releasing anything new unless it doesn't require a different design. That's why I'm moving towards the different color Starfighter. So it's the same file that I can print. It's just putting it in a different color machine.
Well, that's
personally,
I
try and set the machines up so they run one color, so I don't get any streaking or any issues with different types of filament. I like to maintain the one type of color in the machine and just let it run.
Yeah, and that's the one thing when you're talking about the colors. Like, I've seen your white one and your kind of grayish color one, and it was like, well, that's it. You're seeing those, and it's like, well, that's I kind of I expected, well, yeah, if there was a second release, Colonial Viper, that's what it's probably going to look like. Just like Star Wars X-Wing was white, and then later on they had that grayish brown color. So I kept thinking that with the second one, you were going to put little battle damage stickers on the side of it and then send it to Michael just to upset him. So
that's a really good idea.
Yeah. So
I'll have to get my daughter working on that.
Yeah, I think that would be good, and I think that would be with I think the accessories and things like that would add on to something like that would be I think that would be cool, because there'd be the ones who are out there who go, I want the battle damage. And then the ones who go, I don't want the battle.
So, I just recently started a collaboration with a friend out in California who he sells decals on eBay for a lot of the vintage vehicles. And we began a collaboration where he's going to be producing windows for my Viper canopies, because there was a lot of interest. A lot of people like the way that I've designed the canopy with the open aspect, but others want to have some sort of little windows in there. So he's going to be offering windowed canopies to everybody. So I think that's awesome.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic, because I know that looking at, because I know that Michael mentioned that in one of his clips and that sort of thing, and I was kind of like, it didn't even really occur to me that, oh, okay, there's no windows in it. I was just like dazzled by the model. But I think also giving that option that people that you can put a windshield in it or windscreen inside that just adds to it if someone is willing to add those sort of things, and also there's one less thing that you have to do as well.
Right. Yeah, it's off my plate. Because when I was originally designing the Viper, the canopy was something that I really struggled with. I had 3 designs that I had come up with, and I got my friends together and I kind of polled them and said, which one do you like? And it wasn't unanimous, but the one that I ended up going with just the frame, that's the one everybody seemed to like the best. The one that I particularly liked, which was a little more challenging to print, was a two material canopy where the frame looked the same with a dark gray, but the windows were a frosted color. And I thought it looked pretty cool, but manufacturing wise, I was probably getting one good one for every 3 that I printed. I did also have a design that had windows in it where I cut out little pieces of clear plastic and glued them in. But once I was done, I couldn't tell that the windows were in it because they were so clear. So it didn't really make sense to me to go through all that effort if you can't even see them. What I like about the person that's going to be making the windows is he has a smoky version. So it's still clear, but it's a little bit darker, so you can actually see that there's something there. So he did a really nice job with those.
Yeah. That's the other thing is when you're putting these images up on social media and you get that big response. The other thing is for your own interest in Battlestar Galactica, do you find that using new stuff is kind of diminished a bit because it's like you're feeding the animal and you're not really seeing anything else because everyone's just looking at you?
Not really.
Yeah.
Me personally, I only tend to collect vintage toys. Yeah. So unless I'm creating it in my mind as a representation of a vintage toy, my Vipers I still consider to be vintage, even though I'm making them right now. In my mind, it's vintage because that's what the vintage version looked like.
Yeah.
And that's where my heart is. Everything that I personally collect is from the 60s to 90s. I don't really purchase any of the newer remake stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, what we'll do is we'll come close to the end of the interview because I don't want to hold you up any longer, and plus I know that we'll end up talking all night. But what shows and movies from 60s, 70s were influenced you? Like of course you've said Star Wars and Battlestar and Buck Rogers, but what other other programs and films were an influence on you?
Well, none are popping into my head from the 60s and 70s, but something that I'd really, really like to get into as far as making ships and stuff that I think was never acted on is Stargate. I'm a huge fan of the Stargate franchise. Okay. I think they've got some really cool stuff that could be done with that.
Yeah,
is that something that was popular in Australia?
Oh yeah, very popular. It's funny because it's one of the stations here. It's kind of like the equivalent of PBS, but it's like a cooler version of it. Around 6 weeks ago, they went back to the Stargate. They did the Stargate movie, and then they did the pilot, and now they're running through season 1. So they're going to run through the whole thing, and that's every Saturday night. So we've had that's I think around 8:30 or 9:30. So it's a
awesome.
It's one of the the 5 major ones. But yeah, Stargate was extremely popular here for. I think it was around season 3 or 4. One of the major stations here, the equivalent of your CBS, ABC sort of things, was putting it a little bit later, and there was a massive outcry. People saying you need to bring it forward. You can't have it on so late. But no, Stargate. Yes, Stargate was immensely popular. One of my close friends was absolutely, he was the biggest fan. He absolutely just loved it. And if I went over his house, he always had Stargate on. So because when I first heard about it, and he was like, "Oh, they're making a series," and I went, "Oh yeah," and then MacGyver's in it, and I went, what? So he's going to be Kurt Russell. And I was like,
Exactly.
oh, okay. So, yeah, it's,
Yeah, I think that's a absolutely fantastic franchise, and I think that the toy companies missed the boat, because I think if they had created some of the ships, like the Gould Starfighter or the base ship, or even in the series Atlantis, when Earth had ships like the Daedalus, I think that would have made an awesome toy. So I could see myself maybe producing something like that, but I don't think there would be a very big audience for it. So it would probably remain in my basement for me.
Yeah, well, that's always a good thing to show to, and also, it's like you put your toe in the water with this, and then suddenly everyone comes out of everywhere, and suddenly everyone's going, we want this. So yeah,
you never know.
So what other shows?
It's not sci-fi related, but I remember being a big fan of Get Smart and Hogan's Heroes when I was a kid. Those were awesome.
Yeah.
A little humor.
Yeah, no, yeah, like they still get shown, repeated here and that sort of thing. But yeah, I remember as a kid, they were always, the afternoons, either 5 o'clock or or the weekend, afternoon shows, with Hogan's Heroes, or Get Smart and that sort of stuff. And I remember I used to always just do, when Get Smart would start, I'd always wanted to know which car he had when they drove in, so I'd know which season it was. So so I'd come in and go, oh no, this. But I remember even as a young kid, and it would have been around the same time as these movies were, showing in the cinemas, and the Get Smart movie Nude Bomb came out, and I remember standing in line to get some popcorn with a friend of ours who had taken me and my sister to the drive-in, and it had the big poster, and the first thing I saw was the Cylon, the Universal Studios ride from there, because there's a Cylon in one of those big vehicles is on the poster, and Get Smart's like pointing a gun at him, and I was just like, oh, what's this? And they're like, it's not what you think, it's not what you think, it's not what you think. And I went, but is it Get Smart meets Battlestar Galactica or something? And they're like, no. And I think it's funny is, for a movie that was called The Nude Bomb, I was taken to go see it. Of course, there's no nudity in it. It's only just implied. But I remember seeing that at the drive-in. But it was mainly because I pleaded, because there were Cylons on the posters. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think we'll round up, because we've been talking for ages. So I might have to break this up into chapters. But I just want to say it's been an honor to actually speak with you, and I think it's a delight that you and from the heart what you've created, that has inspired so many people around the world, for making something that people have always wanted, and you've kind of niched that little thing. And I think more power to you. And I think it's amazing that
Thank you.
how you've created this, and it's still something that's a passion. And I think, and even reading just the comments of people making, it's, people are so, it's sometimes when you see things with fandom, you get the negatives in there. And I don't think I've actually seen that. People are just being more awestruck by it. And I think it's just absolutely fantastic. And I just want to say thank you very much for your time, and also sharing some information that I know that some 3D printers, students and older ones here will be very interested in following your onward hobby career, and what you've said today. And I want to say, on behalf of TGF and Cause and Effect Gamers, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me on. I am truly humbled and greatly appreciate the conversation and the kind words. Thank you.
Thank you very much.